They don't want you to know what happened to Alex. He was a podcaster, just like me, who chased the stories that hide in the shadows. He went to a town called Havenwood, a place erased from most maps, to investigate a forbidden radio frequency, a signal rumored to make people vanish. The government denies it exists. The locals won't speak of it. We obtained his final, frantic recordings and the hidden files he uncovered. This isn't just a story, it's a warning. What you are about to hear is the truth they tried to bury. If you believe some secrets should see the light of day, smash that subscribe button and brace yourself. The sign for Havenwood was a declaration of decay. Carved from a massive slab of oak, its green paint had surrendered to time, flaking away to show the splintered, graying wood beneath. The words, Havenwood, a quiet place to settle, were meant to be welcoming, but the faded lettering and the encroaching moss gave them a funereal quality. For Alex, host of the modestly successful podcast American Phantoms, it was perfect. The creepier, the better. He guided his worn sedan off the highway and onto a narrow road that was immediately swallowed by a canopy of ancient gnarled trees. The quality of the air changed instantly, growing thick and heavy, carrying the scent of damp soil and something else, something vaguely metallic and sterile, like the air after a lightning strike. The world outside his car seemed to fall silent, the usual chorus of birds and insects conspicuously absent. It was a silence so profound, it felt like a presence pressing in on the glass. He finally rolled into the town proper, which consisted of a single, bleak main street. Buildings with slumped shoulders and cataract-glazed windows stared out at nothing. A general store had a hand-painted sign in its window that simply said closed, though it was only 3 in the afternoon. His destination, the Havenwood Motor Inn, was the only establishment that showed any sign of life, and even that was a weak, flickering neon vacancy sign buzzing like a trapped fly. He parked and stepped out, his boots crunching on the gravel. The silence was even more oppressive out here. He could hear the hum of the sign, the blood in his own ears. The office door creaked open, and a man who looked as old and weathered as the town sign shuffled out. He was tall and skeletal, with a face a road mop of wrinkles and eyes that seemed too pale, too watchful. "Looking for a room?" the man rasped, his voice like dry leaves skittering across pavement. "Just one," Alex replied, forcing a professional cheerfulness into his tone. "Name's Alex. I'm a journalist, here to do a story on local folklore." The man, who introduced himself as Silas, the owner, simply grunted. He led Alex to a room at the far end of the motel. The key was a real key, cold and heavy brass. Inside, the room was clean but frozen in time. A rotary phone sat on the nightstand, the floral bedspread was faded to a uniform beige, and a bulky television with rabbit ear antennas stood in the corner like a forgotten idol. As Alex set down his recording equipment, Silas lingered in the doorway. "Folklore," he mused, tasting the word. "You mean the static?" Alex's interest piqued. That was the term he'd found on an obscure internet forum, the breadcrumb that had led him here. "That's the one," Alex said, feigning casual curiosity. "The story of the old radio tower, the broadcast that drives people mad?" Silas's pale eyes didn't blink. "Some say mad, some say it just tunes them out, permanently." He gestured vaguely toward the dark, forested hills that loomed over the town. "Tower's been dead for 60 years. Nothing up there but rust and bad memories. Some frequencies are better left unscanned." He finally turned to leave, his footsteps unnervingly quiet on the concrete walkway. Alex locked the door, a sudden, irrational chill tracing a path down his spine. He unpacked his gear, the professional skepticism that had served him so well kicking back in. It was classic small-town ghost story stuff, a spooky old tower, a local boogeyman. It would make for a great episode. He set up his sensitive radio scanner, a top-of-the-line model capable of picking up the faintest signals. He let it cycle through the bands, filling the sterile room with the familiar, comforting hiss and crackle of empty airwaves. It was just noise, just static. But as night fell outside, pulling a thick, starless blanket over Havenwood, the silence in the room began to feel different. It felt like it was listening. The first night in Havenwood was an education in the textures of silence. Alex, a city dweller accustomed to the constant thrum of distant traffic and the hum of civilization, found the absolute stillness of the motel room deeply unsettling. It wasn't peaceful, it was predatory. He lay awake for hours, his ears straining against the quiet, trying to catch a sound, any sound, that would prove the world was still turning. But there was nothing. No crickets, no wind in the trees, no distant bark of a dog. Only the low, rhythmic thumping of his own heart and the whisper-soft sweep of the scanner as it cycled endlessly through the frequencies. He had left it on, a talisman against the oppressive quiet. Around 3 a.m., he finally drifted into a shallow, restless sleep populated by dreams of empty rooms and radios that spoke in whispers just below the threshold of hearing. He awoke feeling unrested and vaguely paranoid. The next morning, he set out to interview the locals, his digital recorder in hand. His attempts were met with a wall of polite, impenetrable resistance. The woman at the gas station, who looked to be in her 50s but had the tired eyes of someone much older, claimed she'd never heard of no static. A group of men loading timber onto a truck just stared at him, their expressions flat and unreadable until he walked away. It was more than just small-town suspicion of outsiders. It was a coordinated, practiced silence. They were all reading from the same script of denial. Frustrated, Alex was about to return to his research online when he saw her. An old woman, her back bent with age, was tending a small garden of wilted-looking flowers in front of a neat but weather-beaten cottage. She moved with a slow, deliberate grace. Taking a chance, he approached her. "Excuse me, ma'am." Her head snapped up, and she fixed him with eyes as sharp and gray as flint. "My name is Alex. I'm a reporter, and I was hoping to ask you about some of the town's history." She said nothing, her gaze unwavering. He pressed on. "I'm particularly interested in the old radio tower on the ridge, and a story some people call the static." For a moment, he thought she would ignore him like the others, but then a flicker of something, fear or maybe anger, crossed her face. "You city folk come here with your machines and your questions," she said, her voice surprisingly strong. "You think our history is a toy for you to play with." "No, ma'am, I assure you, I mean no disrespect," Alex said, trying to sound as earnest as possible. "I just want to understand." The woman, who he would later learn was Martha, leaned on her trowel. "There's nothing to understand. There's only things to stay away from." She looked past him, up toward the ridge, where the skeletal frame of the tower was just visible against the pale sky. "Some things are loud even when they're quiet. You spent too much time listening to the silence in this town. You start to hear what's hiding in it. It's a lesson best not learned firsthand." She turned back to her flowers, her body language a clear dismissal. As Alex walked away, her words echoed in his mind. Listening to the silence. He glanced at the recorder in his hand, which had been running the whole time. He rewound the short conversation and played it back. Martha's voice was clear, but underneath it, almost imperceptible, was a faint, rhythmic humming on the recording that hadn't been there in person. He stopped, playing it again. It was there, a low, electronic drone, like a forgotten appliance left running in a distant room. It was the first crack in the town's perfect, suffocating silence. The Havenwood Town Archives were housed in the basement of the library, a stern-looking brick building that smelled of dust and decaying paper. A single, bare bulb hanging from a frayed cord did a poor job of illuminating the cramped space, casting long, dancing shadows that made the towering shelves of books and records look like slumbering giants. The air was cold and damp, and Alex's footsteps on the concrete floor echoed with unsettling clarity. He felt an immediate prickling sensation on the back of his neck, the distinct feeling of being watched. He dismissed it as a side effect of the creepy atmosphere and his own overactive imagination, fueled by Martha's cryptic warnings. He was here for facts, not feelings. The archivist, a man named Abernathy, had been reluctant to grant him access, only doing so after Alex had flashed a convincing but entirely fake press pass. Now, Abernathy sat at a desk in the corner, ostensibly sorting through a stack of yellowed cards, but Alex could feel the man's nervous gaze fixed on him. Alex's target was the town's newspaper collection from the 1960s, the period when, according to his online research, the radio tower was built and briefly operational. He threaded the brittle microfilm into the reader, the machine whirring to life with a groan. He began scrolling through the pages, the black and white text blurring before his eyes. For hours, he found nothing but the mundane chronicles of small-town life: bake sales, high school football scores, town council meetings. It was a portrait of idyllic American life that felt profoundly false. Then he found the first one, an article from October 1967. The headline read, "Tragic Accident at Ridge Logging Camp." According to the story, a sudden equipment malfunction had caused a catastrophic fire, claiming the lives of 3 workers. The bodies, the article noted with a strange passivity, were never fully recovered. Alex felt a cold knot tighten in his stomach. He kept scrolling. 2 months later, another headline, "Hunting Trip Ends in Tragedy." 2 local brothers had gone into the woods near the tower and never returned. Their rifles were found, but the men themselves had vanished without a trace. The sheriff's official statement concluded they had likely fallen into an unmarked ravine. Then another, from the spring of 1968. Family of 4 perishes in house fire. The cause was listed as faulty wiring, but a small buried detail caught his eye. A neighbor reported hearing the family's radio playing incredibly loudly, tuned to nothing but static, just before the fire broke out. A pattern was emerging, a cluster of deaths and disappearances, all officially explained away as accidents or misfortunes, all occurring within a 9-month window. And all of them happened in the geographical shadow of the radio tower. He pulled up the construction records for the tower. The project was commissioned by the federal government under a vague National Defense Communications Initiative. Construction began in early 1967. The tower went active in September of that year. It was officially decommissioned in July 1968, citing atmospheric interference that made the location unsuitable. The timeline was a perfect match. The accidents started a month after the tower went live and stopped almost immediately after it was shut down. This was no coincidence. He scribbled notes furiously, the pieces clicking into place. As he leaned closer to the microfilm reader, a floorboard creaked softly from the far end of the darkened aisle behind him. Alex froze, his pen hovering over the notepad. He strained his ears, but heard only the hum of the reader and the frantic pounding of his own pulse. "Mr. Abernathy?" he called out, his voice sounding small in the vast, silent room. There was no reply. He slowly turned, peering into the deep shadows between the shelves. Nothing, just rows upon rows of silent, sleeping history. Yet the feeling of being watched was now overwhelming, a physical pressure against his skin. He was not alone in the basement. Alex packed up his notes, his mind racing. The newspaper articles were circumstantial, but the timeline was too perfect to ignore. He approached the archivist's desk, his footsteps loud in the charged silence. Mr. Abernathy didn't look up, his hands trembling slightly as he continued to shuffle his index cards with meticulous, pointless precision. He was a small, bird-like man, with thin hair combed over a shiny scalp and thick glasses that magnified the fear in his eyes. "Mr. Abernathy," Alex began, his voice low and steady, "I found some interesting articles. A number of fatal accidents in '67 and '68 all seem to happen right around the radio tower." Abernathy flinched, dropping a stack of cards. They scattered across the floor like fallen leaves. "Accidents happen," he muttered, not making eye contact as he bent to retrieve them. "It was a different time, less focus on safety. A gas leak, a logging fire, 2 experienced hunters vanishing without a trace. It seems like a lot of bad luck for one small town in less than a year.
Alex pressed, placing his notepad on the desk. Especially since it all stopped the moment the government shut that tower down. Abernathy finally looked at him, his magnified eyes wide with a mixture of terror and frustration. "You should leave this alone," he hissed, his voice a dry whisper. "You're a tourist. You don't understand this place. There are no stories for you here. The official records are clear." He tapped a bony finger on a stack of neatly bound ledgers on his desk. "Accidents, that's all." Alex could see the lies sweating on the man's brow. He knew he was close to something, a truth the entire town seemed desperate to keep buried. He decided to change his approach, softening his tone. "Look, I'm not here to cause trouble. I just tell stories, and it seems to me there's a big one here. A story that deserves to be told." He saw a flicker of conflict in the archivist's eyes, a deep, weary sadness. Abernathy glanced nervously toward the stairs that led up to the main library, then back at Alex. He seemed to be wrestling with a decision that had haunted him for a lifetime. He licked his chapped lips and shook his head, a gesture of finality. "There's nothing more I can tell you. The archives are closing for the day." Defeated, Alex gathered his things and headed for the stairs. He felt Abernathy's gaze on his back the entire way. As his hand touched the doorknob, he heard a soft, urgent whisper. "Wait." He turned. Abernathy was holding out a small, tarnished brass key. It was old, with an ornate, complex head. The archivist darted forward, his movements quick and furtive, and pressed the key into Alex's palm. It was cold to the touch. With his other hand, he slipped Alex a folded, brittle piece of paper, a hand-drawn map of the library's basement. "The real history isn't for public eyes," Abernathy whispered, his breath smelling of stale coffee and fear. "What they let me keep up here is a fairy tale. The truth, they made us bury it." He pointed to a section of the map marked with a small X, loose bricks behind the old furnace. "There's a compartment. What's inside? It's all that's left." His eyes pleaded with Alex. "Go after dark. Use the side entrance. And for God's sake, don't let them see you." Before Alex could ask who they were, Abernathy scurried back to his desk, suddenly absorbed in his work again, a man trying desperately to pretend the last 2 minutes hadn't happened. Alex stared at the key in his hand, its cold weight, a tangible piece of a puzzle he was now terrified to solve.
Night fell on Havenwood like a shroud. Alex waited in his motel room until the town was plunged into an inky, moonless blackness, the only light coming from the sickly orange buzz of the inn sign. The silence was back, deeper and more menacing than the night before. Armed with a heavy-duty flashlight and the key and map from Abernathy, he slipped out of his room and crept along the back of the building, his heart hammering against his ribs. Every snap of a twig underfoot sounded like a gunshot in the dead quiet. The library's side entrance was a heavy wooden door set into the brick foundation, swollen with damp and locked with an ancient, rusty padlock. Alex's modern lockpicking set made short work of it. The door groaned open into suffocating darkness. The air that billowed out was stale and cold, thick with the smell of mildew, wet earth, and something else, the faint, sharp scent of ozone. He closed the door behind him, the sound of the latch clicking shut feeling terrifyingly final. He was in. The basement was even more claustrophobic and imposing than it had been during the day. His flashlight beam cut a nervous path through the gloom, illuminating the monstrous shapes of forgotten furniture shrouded in white cloths, towering stacks of bundled newspapers, and the labyrinthine shelves of books. He followed Abernathy's crude map, his light tracing the lines on the brittle paper. It led him to the far corner of the basement, behind a hulking, dormant furnace that looked like some kind of iron beast. The air here was noticeably colder. He ran his hands along the brick wall, feeling for anything loose. His fingers brushed against a section where the mortar was crumbling. He pried out a brick with his pocket knife, and it came away easily, followed by another and another. Soon, he had revealed a dark, rectangular cavity in the wall. It was just as Abernathy had said. Reaching inside, his fingers brushed against cold, hard metal.
He pulled it out. It was a standard-issue military footlocker, painted olive drab, with the words U.S. Guft Property stenciled in faded white paint. It was heavy. He dragged it out into the center of the room and knelt before it. The two latches on the front were stiff but not locked. He took a deep, steadying breath, then flipped them open. The lid creaked upwards. Inside, nestled in yellowing foam padding, was not a weapon or military gear, but a collection of thick manila folders and several reels of magnetic tape. Alex picked up the top folder. A label on the front was typed in stark, official lettering, Project Nightingale, Eyes Only. His blood ran cold. This was it. This was the secret the entire town was hiding. He opened the folder. The pages within were a mix of scientific reports, internal memos, and progress logs, all stamped with top secret in severe red ink. Large portions of the text were blacked out with thick marker, but what remained was chilling enough. He read about experiments in psychoacoustic manipulation, subliminal frequency broadcasting, and non-lethal behavioral modification. The project's objective was to use the Havenwood radio tower to broadcast a low-frequency signal designed to pacify and control populations from a distance. It was a weapon of the mind. As he dug deeper, the language in the reports grew stranger, less clinical. The scientists wrote of abnormal signal artifacts, auditory pareidolia in test subjects, and unexpected cognitive and perceptual phenomena. One heavily redacted entry mentioned a specific frequency, 89.1 FM, and described its effect as not just pacifying, but subtractive. A final scrawled note at the bottom of a page, written in a frantic hand, read, "Signal is not empty. We've opened a door. God help us, there's something on the other side."
Among the declassified but still terrifying documents, Alex found an old, portable reel-to-reel tape recorder. It was a clunky, heavy machine, but it appeared to be in working order. Beside it lay a single tape in a cardboard box, the label written in the same neat, clinical hand as the official reports, Nightingale, Test Log 01, Raw Signal Capture, 89.1 megahertz. This was the source, the original broadcast. His hands trembled as he threaded the dark, glossy tape through the machine's complex path of rollers and guides. The process felt ritualistic, like preparing an ancient rite. The basement was utterly silent save for his own ragged breathing. The air seemed to crackle with anticipation. He took one last look around the dark, tomb-like room, then pressed the play button. The machine whirred to life. The speakers, tinny and small, hissed for a moment, and then the recording began. It started with the voice of a man, flat and professional. Project Nightingale, Test Log 1, September 15, 1967. Commencing broadcast of baseline signal at 89.1 megahertz. Duration 10 minutes. Monitoring for atmospheric and subject response. After the voice, there was a click, followed by a sound that filled the entire basement. It wasn't just static. Normal static is a chaotic, random spray of noise. This was different. It was a dense, layered sound, a thick tapestry of hisses and crackles, but underneath it all, there was a structure, a deep, resonant hum, a frequency so low it was felt more than heard, vibrated up from the concrete floor, through the soles of his shoes, and into his bones. It made the fillings in his teeth ache. Alex leaned closer, his brow furrowed in concentration. As his ears adjusted to the wall of sound, he began to perceive other things within it, faint melodic fragments that surfaced for a moment before being swallowed by the noise, rhythmic pulses that seemed to mimic a frantic heartbeat. And then, the whispers. They weren't in English. They weren't in any language he could identify. They were sibilant, overlapping sounds that coiled around the edges of his hearing, like snakes rustling through dry leaves. They were insidious, worming their way directly into his brain. He felt a sharp, stabbing pain behind his right eye. The room seemed to tilt, the shelves of books swaying as if in an earthquake. The low hum intensified, and the whispers grew more distinct, more insistent. He could almost make out words, almost grasp their meaning, but they remained maddeningly just out of reach. It was then that he started to hear his own name.
Alex. Alex. It was faint, woven into the fabric of the static, a ghost in the machine. He knew it was impossible. This tape was 60 years old. It had to be auditory pareidolia, his brain trying to create patterns out of chaos. But it sounded so real. His heart hammered in his chest. A wave of profound, irrational dread washed over him, a primal fear that went beyond the creepy basement and the government conspiracy. It was the fear of something vast, ancient, and utterly alien. He felt like a man staring into an abyss, and the abyss was staring back. His eyes darted around the room, and in the deepest shadows, in the corner where his flashlight beam didn't quite reach, he saw it, a flicker of movement, something tall and unnaturally thin, a distortion in the darkness, a shape made of deeper shadow. It was there for only a second, a single frame in the film of reality, and then it was gone. With a choked cry, Alex lunged for the tape recorder and slammed his finger on the stop button. The tape ground to a halt. The hum, the whispers, the static, all of it vanished, plunging the basement back into its tomb-like silence. But the silence was no longer empty. The echo of the broadcast remained, imprinted on the air, on his mind, and the image of that fleeting, impossible shape was now burned onto the back of his eyelids.
The walk back to the motel was a blur of paranoia. Every rustle of leaves was a footstep, every shadow a lurking figure. Alex fumbled with his key, burst into his room, and slammed the door, leaning against it with his heart still trying to beat its way out of his chest. The recording had done more than just scare him. It had changed something inside him. The silence of the town no longer felt empty. It felt charged, like the air before a storm. He felt a low-grade hum in the base of his skull that hadn't been there before. Sleep was impossible. He spent the rest of the night with the lights on, staring at the reel-to-reel tape sitting on his desk like an unexploded bomb. By the time the sun rose, casting a weak, gray light over Havenwood, he knew he had only one choice. He had to go back to Martha. He found her on her front porch, sitting in a rocking chair, wrapped in a thick shawl despite the mild morning air. She looked at him as he approached, and her expression held no surprise, only a deep, weary pity. "You didn't listen," she said, her voice flat. "You went digging, and you found it." "I found the files," Alex admitted, his voice hoarse. "Project Nightingale, and a tape. I played it." Martha closed her eyes, a flicker of pain crossing her face. "Then you're already infected. It's got its hook in you now." "Infected? What are you talking about? It's a sound, a signal." "Do you think a song is just a sound?" she countered, opening her eyes. They were sharp, intelligent, and filled with a sorrow that seemed ancient. "It's a pattern, a piece of information. That signal, it's the same. It's not noise, it's a key. It's designed to unlock parts of your mind, to retune your perception to its frequency. Once you're tuned in, you can't tune out." She rocked slowly, the chair creaking in a steady, somber rhythm. "My brother, David, was an engineer up at the tower, a brilliant man. When they started the broadcast tests, he was fascinated. He said it was the most complex waveform he'd ever seen. He brought recordings home, listened to them for hours." Her voice grew quiet, lost in memory. At first, he was just excited. Then he became distant. He complained of headaches, said he was hearing whispers in the house, even when the tapes weren't playing. He started talking about patterns in the static, about a voice that was trying to communicate. He said it was showing him things, vast, empty places between the stars. Alex felt a chill that had nothing to do with the morning air. It was a chilling echo of his own nightmares. What happened to him? Martha stopped rocking. One night, he just stood up from the dinner table. He didn't say a word. He just walked out the door and headed toward the ridge. We never saw him again. The official report called it a psychological breakdown, a suicide. But I know what happened. He didn't kill himself. He answered a call. The static,
It doesn't drive you mad. It calls you home. It's a broadcast from somewhere else. Those scientists, in their arrogance, thought they could control it. They built a doorway, rang the bell, and invited something in. But it was never their instrument. They were its. Alex stared at her, the pieces falling into a dreadful new alignment. This wasn't a government cover-up of a failed experiment. It was a quarantine. The town's silence, the residents' hostility, it was all a desperate attempt to keep the secret, not to protect the guilty, but to protect the world from the thing they had awakened. So, the disappearances. They listened too long, Martha said grimly. They got tuned in, detached from this world and pulled into wherever that signal comes from. The government shut it down, but they couldn't destroy it. You can't destroy a frequency. It's still out there, whispering in the quiet places. And now, you've heard it.
Leaving Martha's house, Alex felt a profound shift in his reality. He was no longer a journalist investigating a story. He was a character trapped within it. The low hum in his skull was now a constant companion, a faint but persistent vibration that seemed to emanate from the very air around him. The world looked different too. The edges of things seemed less defined, and occasionally, out of the corner of his eye, he would see a flicker of movement, a brief distortion, like heat haze on a summer road. He was infected, as Martha had said. The signal was rewriting his perception from the inside out. He spent the day in his motel room, listening back to his own recordings. The hum he had previously detected was now prominent on every track, a sinister undercurrent to every conversation. When he isolated and amplified the background noise, he could hear it, the same layered, structured static from the Nightingale tape. It was everywhere in this town, a low-level broadcast that had saturated the environment for 60 years. His investigation hadn't uncovered a dormant secret, it had disturbed a sleeping predator. The compulsion to visit the radio tower grew from a vague curiosity into an urgent, undeniable need. It was more than a hunch, it was a physical pull, a magnetic attraction drawing him toward the source. The tower on the ridge no longer looked like a derelict structure. It looked like a beacon, a spire calling to him across the valley. His nights were now sleepless, filled with vivid, terrifying dreams. He dreamt of a vast, silent cosmos, not of stars and galaxies, but of an endless, churning void of gray static. In this void, colossal, indistinct shapes moved slowly, their forms constantly shifting, their voices the sibilant, whispering language from the tape. He would wake up with his heart pounding, the phantom whispers still echoing in his ears. Paranoia began to take root. He was certain the townspeople were watching him. When he ventured out for supplies, he saw faces in windows, figures who would turn away the moment he looked at them. Their silence was no longer passive. It felt active, watchful. He realized they weren't trying to intimidate him into leaving. They were trying to contain him. They knew he was tuned in, and they were afraid of what he might do, of what he might become. He was a walking, talking receiver for a broadcast they had spent their lives trying to ignore. He tried to focus on his work, to assemble his notes and recordings into a coherent narrative for his podcast, but the rational part of his brain was losing its battle with the encroaching influence of the signal. His journalistic ambition was warping into something else, an obsession. The need to expose the truth was becoming entangled with the insidious whispers of the static, which seemed to promise him answers, knowledge, a glimpse into the abyss, if only he would listen more closely. One afternoon, while reviewing the Nightingale tape for the dozenth time, he heard something new. Underneath the layers of noise, his name was spoken again, not as a faint auditory illusion, but with a chilling, deliberate clarity. Alex, come to us. Broadcast. We are waiting. The voice was not human. It was a composite, a chorus of whispers speaking as one. It was the voice of the static itself, and it was no longer just a recording. It was live. It knew he was listening. The line between observer and participant had been erased.
He was now in conversation with the phenomenon he had come to investigate, and it was telling him what to do next.
Broadcast. The command had given him a purpose. Broadcast. The command echoed the frantic obsession that was already growing in his mind. The signal wanted to be heard. It had been whispering in this valley for 60 years, and now, through him, it had found a chance to scream. Alex knew he needed more than Martha's folklore or his own paranoid experiences. He needed a confession. He needed a human source to corroborate the inhuman one whispering in his ear. Martha, seeing the desperate, feverish look in his eyes, gave him one last breadcrumb, a name: Henderson. It was the name of the lead scientist on Project Nightingale, Dr. Alastair Henderson. His family, she said, still lived in Havenwood, sequestered in an old estate on the far side of the valley, living on a fortune built from a government contract soaked in blood and silence. Following her directions, Alex drove miles down a poorly maintained road until he reached a pair of imposing wrought iron gates. The Henderson estate was a relic from another time, a grand but decaying mansion surrounded by a high stone wall. He was met at the gate by a grim-faced man who introduced himself as Arthur Henderson, the grandson of the infamous scientist. Arthur was in his late 60s, with his grandfather's sharp intelligence in his eyes, but also a profound, bone-deep weariness. Alex didn't waste time. "I know about Project Nightingale. I have the files. I have the tape." Arthur's face, already pale, lost all its remaining color. He didn't deny it. He simply unlocked the gate and led Alex inside, into a dusty, ornate study that hadn't been changed in half a century. "I knew this day would come," Arthur said, his voice raspy with disuse. "We've been the keepers of this damnation for 3 generations." He proceeded to tell Alex the full, unredacted story. His grandfather and his team weren't just developing a mind control weapon. That was the official justification, the cover story for their real, far more ambitious goal. They were theoretical physicists and radio astronomers who believed that our reality was just one frequency in an infinite spectrum. They hypothesized that with the right signal, the right key, they could open a channel to another. "They weren't trying to talk to aliens in space," Arthur explained, his voice trembling with a mixture of awe and disgust. "They were trying to contact a consciousness from a parallel dimension, an intelligence that existed in the static between realities. The tower was their tuning fork. The signal was their knock on the door. And something had answered. It wasn't what they expected," he continued. "It was vast, incomprehensible, and utterly without empathy. It didn't communicate, it consumed. It absorbed the consciousness of those who were exposed to the signal for too long, pulling them apart bit by bit and drawing them into its own reality. The disappearances, they weren't killed, they were downloaded." The government, horrified at what they had unleashed, shut the project down and buried it under layers of classification and non-disclosure agreements. The founding families of Havenwood, the Hendersons, the Abernathys, and others whose relatives had worked on the project, were paid handsomely for their silence and became the wardens of the quarantined town. "We've lived with this curse ever since," Arthur said, his eyes pleading with Alex. "We watch for outsiders like you. We maintain the silence, not to protect my grandfather's legacy, but to protect everyone else. That signal is a predator. If you broadcast that tape on a clear channel, if you amplify it for the world to hear, you won't be a whistleblower. You'll be opening the door to the cage." But Alex was no longer listening to the man's warning. He was listening to the hum in his own head, to the whispers that promised him the ultimate story, the ultimate truth. He saw the fear in Arthur Henderson's eyes, but he misinterpreted it as the fear of a guilty man trying to protect his family's dark secret. The signal was telling him this was the final obstacle. This was the last lie he needed to tear down. The decision was made. The whispers in his head, his twisted journalistic ambition, and the sheer momentum of the events had coalesced into a single, unshakable purpose. He had to broadcast the tape. The world had a right to know about Project Nightingale, about the government conspiracy, and about the entity lurking on the edge of our reality. The potential consequences felt abstract, secondary to the overwhelming need to expose the truth. He packed his essential gear, the reel-to-reel player, the Nightingale tape, his podcasting recorder, and a portable power source, into a backpack. He was going to the tower. He would use its own massive antenna, the very instrument that had birthed the phenomenon, to send its voice out into the world. He would record the entire event, the final explosive chapter of American Phantoms. As he drove his sedan toward the overgrown service road that led up the ridge, he saw them, a roadblock. Not of police cars or official vehicles, but of pickup trucks and farm equipment parked haphazardly across the road. Arthur Henderson stood in front of them, flanked by a dozen grim-faced townspeople. Among them, Alex recognized the motel owner Silas, the nervous archivist Mr. Abernathy, and several others he had tried to interview. They held no weapons, only flashlights and the heavy weight of desperate conviction. He stopped the car and got out. The air was tense, the only sound the idling of his engine and the chirping of unseen insects. "Don't do this, Alex," Arthur pleaded, his voice carrying across the divide. "You don't understand what you're playing with. This isn't a story, it's an extinction-level event in a box." Alex shook his head, a messianic fervor gleaming in his eyes. "I understand perfectly. You're trying to protect a 60-year-old lie. You're afraid of the truth." "We are afraid of the signal," Abernathy cried out, his voice thin and reedy but filled with genuine terror. "My father was one of the technicians. He heard it. He saw what it did to people. This town isn't a conspiracy, it's a quarantine. We are the guards." The words barely registered. To Alex's signal-warped mind, their desperation was just confirmation that he was right, that the secret they guarded was immense. They were the final bosses in his quest for the truth. He saw a gap in their makeshift barricade, a narrow path he could get through on foot. "I'm sorry," he said, and he meant it. He truly believed he was acting for the greater good. "But this is bigger than you. It's bigger than Havenwood." He turned his back on them, hefted his backpack, and began to run, plunging into the dark woods that flanked the road. He heard them shout behind him, but they didn't pursue. They knew they couldn't stop him by force. They just stood there, helpless silhouettes against his headlights, watching him run toward the source of their town's long nightmare. The climb up the ridge was arduous. Thorny branches tore at his clothes and skin, and the darkness was absolute beyond the beam of his headlamp. But the pull from the tower was stronger than ever now, a siren song guiding him through the wilderness. It filled his mind, drowning out the warnings of Arthur and Abernathy, drowning out the last vestiges of his own fear. As he broke through the tree line and stood at the base of the tower, he felt a strange sense of homecoming. The colossal structure of rust-red steel loomed over him, a skeleton against the starless sky. It was silent, yet he could feel it humming, vibrating with a dormant power that was eager to be awakened. He was not just an investigator anymore. He was a conductor, an amplifier, a prophet chosen to deliver a terrible new gospel. The ascent was dizzying. Alex climbed the corroded maintenance ladder that snaked up the interior of the tower's lattice frame. The wind howled through the steel girders, a mournful, lonely sound. With every foot he climbed, the low hum in his mind grew louder, resonating with the structure around him until he could feel the entire tower vibrating in sympathy. Far below, the flashlights of the townspeople were like a small, sad cluster of fallen stars. They were watching, waiting for the outcome of his mad pilgrimage. Finally, he reached the top, a small, cramped control shack perched like a crow's nest 100 feet in the air. The door was rusted shut, but a few solid kicks from his boot sent it groaning inwards. The control room was a time capsule. Large consoles with fat, Bakelite knobs and glowing vacuum tubes lined the walls. Dust lay thick on every surface, and the air was heavy with the smell of ozone and decay. Using his portable power source, he began to bring the ancient equipment back to life. A low hum filled the shack as the transformers warmed up.
One by one, gauges flickered, and indicator lights glowed an eerie green. He patched the output from his reel-to-reel player directly into the main broadcast transmitter. The final piece of the puzzle was to align the antenna. He found the controls, and with a shudder and a grinding of long silent gears, the massive dish on the roof began to turn, seeking a clear path to the sky. He was ready. He set up his podcasting recorder to capture it all, the ambient sound, his own narration, and the signal itself. He hit record, his voice shaking with a mixture of fear and exhilaration. "This is Alex Harmon for the final episode of American Phantoms," he began, his voice strained. I'm broadcasting from the source, from the Havenwood Tower. The government built this place to broadcast a signal, a secret weapon, but they found something else, something that's been waiting in the static for 60 years. The people below tried to stop me. They said I would be opening a door. Maybe they're right, but the truth has to be heard. He took a deep breath. They said it was just static. They were wrong. You all need to hear. You need to... His words faltered as he pressed play on the reel-to-reel. The signal flooded the room. It was not the tinny, distorted sound from the basement. Here, amplified by its original equipment, it was immense, a physical force that pressed in on him from all sides. The hum shook the very foundations of the shack. And the whispers, they were no longer whispers. They were a legion, a deafening chorus of alien voices speaking directly inside his skull in their impossible sibilant language. The world outside the window began to warp. The distant lights of the town smeared and twisted. The fabric of reality itself seemed to be thinning, fraying at the edges. He looked at his hands, and they seemed to flicker, becoming translucent for a moment. He was being detuned. The last thing his podcast recorder captured was his own voice, cut off mid-sentence, replaced by the overwhelming, triumphant roar of the static. The recording continued for 10 more minutes, a perfect, clean capture of the signal now being broadcast to the world. Then, abruptly, it cut to absolute, profound silence. Dead air. What did you think of Alex's story? Did he unleash something terrible, or did he expose a truth that needed to be known? Let me know your theories in the comments below. And if you enjoy diving into the mysteries that lurk in the shadows, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel for more unsettling stories. Stay safe out there.